Now invite Mr. Ajay Banga, President of the World Bank Group, to address the conference.
That's all. Your Majesties, President Sanchez, Secretary General Guterres, distinguished guests, I think we are at an inflection point for development. On the one hand, we have the familiar challenges of poverty and fragility and conflict and rising debt and the need to build climate resiliency into everything that we do. Remember, ending poverty on a livable planet, as you saw in the opening video, is the mission of the World Bank Group. But on the other, there is a fast approaching demographic surge in emerging markets. I think that presents a huge opportunity for our future. But that's only happens if these young people have access to clean air and clean water and education and health when they're growing up, and when they're ready, the chance to have a job. And I think that challenge will require resources at an unprecedented scale and pace. We know that there is philanthropies or in development institutions to meet every projection or every approaches this issue. So let me start with what I do with the World Bank Group. We've been asked to move faster, simplify, operate more efficiently, deliver more impact. What to do over the last couple of years is respond with a set of reforms aimed at one simple goal. And this is the word that Bob used: be a better partner to our private sector and government clients. So for example, we've cut project approval times by a third, from 19 to 13 months, with some projects now getting approved in under 30 days. We've helped to deepen collaboration across the MDBs and DFI system. We've given clients a single point of contact by merging all our structures in 40 countries already, with more to come. We've replaced 153 item scorecard with 22 outcome-focused metrics. And we've sort of shaped our ambition around some very clear goals. Connect 1.5 billion to primary healthcare, for example, or deliver capital to 80 million women to open businesses, or double the agribusiness financing we do to 9 billion a year. All the idea is to build ecosystems of growth. Last year, we put $133 billion to work, plus mobilized another 66 billion of private capital. And with the new instruments and capital efficiency measures, we can expand our lending capacity by another 100 billion over the decade. The point is, this is all inadequate compared to the numbers you hear for the promises we need to deliver. Even our IDA 21 replenishment campaign, for which I thank many of you in the audience, including the government of Spain for their generosity, even that replenishment campaign, which put together with our leverage capacity, allows us to raise $100 billion for the next 3 years, 70% of which will go to Africa. Even that, at the end of the day, is inadequate when you add the challenges and the money that needs to be put to work. Now, there's many ways to tackle this. We're not all just stuck. So for governments, the starting point is spending better. In developing countries, if they raise their revenues, as I think Antonio mentioned, domestic resource mobilization. If they raise their revenues to 15% of GDP, they could unlock 400 billion annually. In partnership with the IMF, and Nigel is here, we're helping them get there. And then we assist them with budget reviews, cutting what doesn't work, shift spending to what does. We've already done this for 13 countries. We're in the process of doing it for 11 more. What happens when you're doing these reviews is you discover hidden potential, like the $1.25 trillion every year that is spent on subsidies for agriculture, fisheries, and fossil fuels around the world. Don't get me wrong, some of those are necessary, but many are inefficient. You repurpose a portion and you could free up funds while still protecting the vulnerable. So such actions can take us far, but we need the private sector and the jobs they create, because jobs are the surest way to put a nail in the coffin of poverty. But the private sector cannot succeed alone. Our communal efforts are needed to create the right conditions, and I put those in three pillars. The first is essential infrastructure, both physical, roads, ports, water, power, and human, healthcare, education, and skills, each with resiliency built into it. Second, a business-friendly environment, clear laws, transparent institutions. Third, support to scale for the private sector through capital and tools that reward risk-taking and the sharing of the returns between the public and the private. I think the bank delivers all of these. We operate across the continuum of public financing, knowledge, and private sector tools. What we're trying to do is focus on 5 sectors that generate local job creation. These are not sectors that are dependent on outsourcing from the developed economies. And that's infrastructure, physical and human, agribusiness, healthcare, tourism, and local value-added manufacturing. The potential of these sectors will only be realized if capital flows. Private investors don't fund good intentions. They fund opportunity, and they go where there is a probability of return. I was in the private sector for 40 years. I learned one thing, a probability of return with a management of risk, and I'll put my money to work. Over 5 years, the World Bank Group has provided $560 billion in financing, the last 5. We've mobilized $200 billion in private capital. And what doesn't get counted, we've also raised $250 billion from investors through bonds. The point is, it's still not enough. That's why we brought to work with the private sector through a lab that actually Mark Carney and Shriti Vadera ran for us until Mark moved on to a somewhat more important role. And we're now deploying sort of practical tools to overcome each of these. The first, regulatory policy certainty. We're helping governments create investable environments. We're proving that it works through the energy compacts we're doing right now with a number of governments in Africa, many of whom are here in this room. They're committing to regulatory reforms. The idea is to advance our goal of providing electricity to 300 million people by 2030 in partnership with the African Development Bank. Second, political risk insurance. Even if you get this regulatory policy, the private investor needs this kind of insurance. We've streamlined our guarantees. Early signs, both in volume and client feedback, are very promising. Third, foreign exchange. Volatility will deter long-term investing. So 1/3 of IFC's long-term commitments now in local currency, and we're headed to a target of 40% by 2030. Fourth, junior equity capital. We have launched the Frontier Opportunities Fund. This is a vehicle we have seeded with $100 million of IFC's income currently. We plan to do that every year. The idea is to absorb first loss risk. It's built to grow through donor and philanthropic contributions. And last, securitization, where we're working with global financial partners to standardize and package our loan portfolios and those of our brothers in the other MDBs, making it easier for large institutional investors to come into the emerging markets. Each of these efforts, the purpose is lower barriers that keep capital on the sidelines. But the real measure of success is not capital. It's the mind is the dignity that a job gives you every day. By 2050, more than 80% of the world's population will live in countries we now call developing. In just the next decade, 1.2 billion young people will reach working age in these countries, and they'll be competing for only 400 million jobs that are likely to be created. That's a gap of 800 million. This generation has the collective power to shape the course of humanity for the next century. The question is, does that power ignite or does it impede? And that will depend on the choices we make at events like this. We have the opportunity. Do we have the will to create the conditions for job and unlock a generation's potential? That's the dedication that you'll find us at the World Bank moving towards. Thank you very much, sir.